Welcome, everyone, to the Way, Truth, Life podcast. I'm your co-host, Olivia, and I'm here with my sweet husband, Jordan.
Hey, guys.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your week to come listen to us. We just really appreciate you hopping in and supporting your local Christian podcast, and so thank you.
Absolutely. We love you guys. We appreciate you guys. Make sure to subscribe and share this podcast with everybody that you know, and let's get the word out.
Absolutely. And you can follow us on any of the social medias and all of that stuff. So
All of them. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook,
you
name it. That's where we're on.
Yep. So today we're going to be talking about Jesus flipping tables.
Flipping tables like Jesus.
So it's a little bit more of a topic like season 1 is, because I know season 2 we're going to talk about verses in particular. So we're going to be in John 2 tonight, but we also just want to talk about just the idea in general of Jesus flipping tables. And because a lot of times you hear people saying that, like, oh, what would Jesus do? Well, he might flip tables, kind of thing.
Right.
Like being able to use it as an excuse to just turn up on somebody.
Right.
But so we want to look at that tonight and see what does the context say, and why did Jesus flip tables? Like, was that a sin? You know, just talk about all that. So
Right. So let's break it down.
sounds good.
All right. You said John chapter 2, right?
Yeah, and before we get there, something I noticed too is that Jesus driving people out of the temple is in all 4 Gospels. So that's important to note, because obviously this is an important event that every single person who witnessed Jesus or heard accounts thought should be in the book. And so this isn't one of those things where it's like, oh, I don't know if that really happened because Matthew wrote it and maybe he wasn't sure or something. Like this happened, and this is important because it's in all 4 Gospels. And so just thought that was interesting. But we're going to look at the one in John 2, like I said, today, because it has some things the other ones don't have.
Absolutely. So let me go ahead and read it. We're going to read John 2. We're going to start from verse 13. It reads, "Now the Passover of the Jews was at hand, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And he found in the temple those who sold oxen and sheep and doves, and the money changers doing business. When he had made a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money, and overturned the tables. And he said to those who sold doves, 'Take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of merchandise.' Then his disciples remembered that it was written, 'Zeal for your house has eaten me up.'" Should I keep going?
I think you could stop there probably.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Well, all right. Flipping tables.
Flipping tables.
We're here.
So the context of this too is Jesus actually just performed his first miracle. So sometimes we like to think about this after he's already had a bunch of disciples and stuff, and he does have disciples, but this is before he's given his speech with the Sermon on the Mount or anything. He changed the water to wine, so we know that he likes to hang out with people and celebrate life and marriage.
Right.
And then literally the next paragraph, he comes in and is flipping these tables. So interesting.
Right. That is interesting. I want, like, the discrepancy of that is interesting. Yeah.
I think it might be good to talk about too why is there a bunch of animals in the temple? You know, like, why is there animals and people selling things and stuff? Like, I think it might be good to talk about what's going on, because when you think about churches today, there's definitely not animals, and you don't see people selling things. So I think a good question might be, was that a custom back then, or, you know, what do you think, Jordan?
Yeah, no. So the reason that people had animals in the temples were because they would use them for different kind of sacrifices. So before Jesus died on the cross, you couldn't just get on your knees and pray to God and be like, "Jesus, forgive my sins."
Right.
There was a way to go about handling sin, and so it had to do with the sacrifice of certain animals and oxen. And if that's something that you guys are interested more in, email us and we can definitely do a dive on sacrifices and sin and what that looked like for people in the Old Testament.
Mm-hmm.
And so people were selling these at the temple because people needed to buy an animal to sacrifice. Right? They were selling atonement offerings. However, what made this wrong specifically is that it was prophesied that kind of what Jesus was talking about, that they would turn his house, people would turn God's house into a den of robbers, right? You're making people spend money to atone for their sin. And that's not what God ever wanted. Right. He's like, we shouldn't be in the temple selling doves and selling oxen and selling things that people need for sacrifices to atone for their family. Because imagine if you couldn't afford it. Imagine you couldn't afford the oxen for your sin. You know, that would suck. Your family couldn't atone for the sin that they made in theory. According to the law, they couldn't atone for that. All because pastor, priest, Pharisee, so-and-so got a little greedy. So that's why Jesus got angry.
Man. Because, I love that you brought that up. Because, they used animal sacrifices a lot to atone for the sin, which is interesting to say that because God didn't want us to ever spend or pay anything for that, our sacrifice. You know, he was always willing to provide it, whether it was animals or himself. He wanted to provide the sacrifice. You know, he didn't want us to do anything. And so it's tough with these people too, because if it's a temple, people are coming from all over the country to come and worship God, and they can't because they have to pay a fee, which is the exact opposite of God, you know. God does not want a concert or a show. He just wants people to come as they are, and he wants to just build a relationship with everyone. It kind of makes me think a little bit of I remember when Justin Bieber first kind of turned his life around and was singing worship songs and everything like that. He went to a church to sing worship there, not lead, but I think he was just there just as like a one-off Sunday or something like that. But it wasn't a concert. He was there to support the church. And the church ended up selling tickets to go in the church and attend service. And it's just kind of funny because it can be hard to draw that line where it's like, well, he's a performer, but he wasn't there to perform necessarily. He wasn't supposed to be. He was there to help lead worship, you know, but he was so famous and popular that they were selling tickets. And it just made me think of this because, you know, God's house isn't a place for us to perform at. It's a place for us to come and just soak in God's presence, you know, and offer him glory and honor and praise, and just be able to be ourselves and just get that filling we need, and also pouring right back out to God. And so the fact that they're selling these right inside the temple, this place where it's supposed to be holy and sacred, is just messed up. Like, you can take all of your affairs outside of it, but God wants your full attention and just everything, like your full attention and love and just everything that you have to offer him without any distractions, right? Without having to worry about these kind of things. And so having the people sell inside the temple takes away from this sacred place. You know?
Absolutely. And I love the example that you used of Justin Bieber. And there've been, I remember when Kanye really started his, Sunday worship services, and people were spending dozens of dollars for like breakfast there. And, same thing. Like, some people were like spending money to get in, and, it was, what we're doing when we do that is we're elevating status, we're elevating money in the same level of God, and that's wrong. That church never should have made made anybody pay to go see Justin Bieber if he was on the worship team on a Sunday morning. Because people are there to worship, and he's there to worship. That makes no sense. Now, if it was a one-off venue, whatever.
Sure.
If it's like, oh yeah, Friday night, Justin Bieber's coming, pay to get whatever. Whatever. But when you're doing that to promote people to come to your church on Sunday, And the only thing that we remember is that Justin Bieber came. We don't remember if the gospel was preached. We don't remember if people gave their life to Christ, or if people were just there truly just to see a celebrity.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Or just to make a buck.
Right.
And so when we bring it back to the temple, people are doing this to make a buck. They're not doing it to help people get closer to God. They're not doing it to help people avoid sin and try to, you know, live a holy and a righteous life. They're doing it to make a buck.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's all about making money. And think about it like this too. The day that this was done was Passover. You know, Passover was huge. One of the biggest Jewish holidays.
That's true.
At the time. So you said people are coming all over the city. People are coming from all over different regions.
That's true.
All kinds of places. So, and again, the temple in Jerusalem was a big place for people to come and gather.
Yeah.
And so the biggest event of the year, and people are selling things that everybody's coming there for. It's like, okay, I see what you're doing. And that's, you know, that's what makes Jesus mad, man.
Absolutely. And it takes the attention away from God.
Right.
And it's not like God's an attention needy person who needs it all the time, but instead it's, how can you truly get everything that God has for you if you're distracted and focused on other things going on?
Right,
you
exactly.
know? And it's interesting too, because it talks about in here, you know, that was the people selling the cattle and stuff, but also it says people exchanging money. And so when I looked into it a little bit more, Judea was technically under Roman law, so they used Roman coins.
Right.
But because it was in a temple, oftentimes people would come and they would say, you can buy a sheep for a Jewish coin. So people would only have Roman coins, so they'd have to exchange their coins.
Wow.
And so the people would do the coin exchange right there in the temple. And naturally, too, they would take some for themselves to get a little profit off it. It wouldn't be an exact even $5 US is $5 something else. Instead, it would be, okay, well, I'm going to take 20% of that, too.
Right. Wow.
So not only are these families hungry, tired, you know, they're not the richest people. Everyone comes to Passover, regardless of your status.
Mm-hmm.
They also have to change this money, and they don't have much to begin with in the first place. And so they left coming to God's house more empty than when they came in.
Right. Now think about too, like where these guys are coming from. These people were coming from long distances.
Right.
Long distances. Like, you know, when you're traveling and you're going and you made it all the way to this one place, and let's say you forgot something at home.
Right.
Other than like, okay, like, you know, try to figure it out. You're gonna just go buy another thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
You're gonna try to figure it out. You're like, oh. You know, I know it's like $7 for a bottle of water, but bro, we done made it this far, so I'm gonna drop that $7, Disneyland. But anyway, we'll talk about the topic of evil another day.
Oh my gosh,
Disneyland. But anyway, people were tired.
Mm-hmm.
People were coming here with their families, you know, all the way to this temple. And like you pointed out, okay, I just have Roman coins and I got to exchange it. So, you know, these people are using greed to get at these people.
Right.
You know, to extort them of their money.
Yeah.
And that's evil. That's super evil, especially as God's representative. You know, now that you made it this far, we're going to go ahead and scam you.
Right. Which I don't think that ended back then. You know, I think you still see that today.
Right.
Where churches are, you know, they'll say you can come, but then they say, oh, well, you have to do this to be saved.
Right.
You know, Jesus' blood wasn't enough. You actually have to give this amount of money too.
Right. Prosperity gospel.
Or, you know, you might be saved, but you can't take communion with us because you're not quite good enough for that.
Right.
You know? And so it's just crazy. It's sad because there are churches that do that say you have to do more to be able to get what God has for you. And I don't think God ever intended for that to happen.
Right.
You know, we were never meant to be the gatekeepers of who comes in and out. That's God's responsibility.
Right.
I saw this church sign once. It was pretty funny. It said, you know, you just bring in the fish. I'll sort them out later.
Mm-hmm.
And that's exactly how it is.
Right.
It's not our responsibility to figure out, oh, well, that person's good or that person isn't or whatever. We're just supposed to bring them in.
Right.
And God will do what he does, and so let alone try to make a profit out of God's like death and salvation. Like, it just diminishes the power. It makes it seem like you don't actually believe what it is. Because if you truly, really believed in the amazing power of salvation, you wouldn't need to be trying to make an extra buck. Nothing else matters compared to it.
Right.
Nothing else in this world will matter compared to that.
Absolutely.
And if anything, you want everyone to get that gift. You want everyone to be able to go in and receive that.
Absolutely.
And so trying to make an extra dollar off it just cheapens what Jesus did for us.
Absolutely.
Not saying his blood and his salvation and dying on the cross could ever be diminished. But when we do that, we cast a light that says, well, this is just something you buy. This is just something you can get.
Right.
It's another market situation.
Absolutely.
When it never was meant to be like that in the first place. So.
Right. And so you're totally right, And now you see, why Jesus was so angry. Right. And so first, even before we get into how Jesus reacted, we have to address something that I think a lot of people struggle with today. And that's this concept of anger being a sin.
Oh.
And maybe that's another topic that we go deeper into another day. Y'all let us know if that's what you want us to hear.
Yeah.
But there's a verse that says, don't let the sun go down on your anger.
Yep.
Right? And it talks about anger just being a root to sin or a root or a cause to sin or things like that. And people interpret that verse meaning that anger is a sin.
Right.
And that Christians are just supposed to be happy all the time and joyous all the time and never angry and all that. And it's unrealistic. It's unrealistic. So, like, I have a testimony actually with that. So I had a friend in high school and she was a Buddhist. And I'm just going to make a caveat. I don't know a lot about Buddhism. And so I'm not talking down or making fun, or if I'm misunderstanding, please correct me. But from what I understood, she, she was on this path of enlightenment, and I remember she used to come in with like buckets of chicken, and she had to eat all of it because they don't believe in wasting food.
Oh man.
All that, like literally like whole buckets.
Oh my
and
gosh.
she was a small girl. It was incredible. But anyway. But what I remember, she was always happy. Always had a smile on her face, even when she was mad and sad. She would never cry. And I think she said it's because, crying or anger was, not seen as good. And so that can actually like hurt, their chances when they die, or hurt their chance of like enlightenment and something like that. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like I'm kind of misunderstanding. And so, but I see that it's like, that looks unnatural.
Right.
Like she's trying to hold in tears or trying to fight the desire to get angry over things that she should get angry about.
Right.
And it's like, man, there's a lot of folks who are following Jesus who feel the same way. Like, you're holding in so much, and what happens is that's not how God made you.
Right.
That's why when you see people who hold in anger, who hold in emotion, sadness, whatever, you see the negative health consequences of that.
Yeah.
If that's truly what God wanted you to do, why is there a correlation between holding in anger and things like heart attack, things like aneurysm, things like sickness, weaker immune systems? Because that's not how you were designed. Anger is not a sin. How you express it is. You can be angry all you want. You can be angry. You can yell. You can scream. You can do that. That's fine. God gets angry.
Right.
God yells. God screams. But God doesn't sin.
Right.
It says, "Be angry, but sin not."
Yep.
Meaning, you can be angry, just don't slap that person across the face, man. That's not it. You can be angry, but don't cuss this person out. That's not it. Yep. But anger can be a good thing, because anger shows, wow, that really hurt me. That's really not okay.
Absolutely.
Or that really hurts God, and that's really not okay.
Yeah. That's so good. I like to that verse you said, because I was going to bring that up too, where it says, basically, don't sin in your anger. And if they were the same thing, then you wouldn't need that verse in the Bible. Because then that's the same thing. It's like, don't sin in your sin. But it's not the same thing. That's why it specifically says, in your anger, don't sin. Because what that implies is you can be angry and not sin. You can be angry and be okay. And if you believe that Jesus is perfect and was perfect and walked a perfect life, that means he didn't sin here when he was literally tossing tables, you know, which means anger is not a sin, and it actually can even be used for good.
Absolutely.
Jordan, actually, you helped me out with this a lot. When I used to think more similarly to what you were describing, where people are thinking it's a sin and stuff. I used to think it wasn't a good thing and I should never ever feel angry and whatnot. But I remember, Jordan, you saying that if it wasn't for anger, the civil rights movement wouldn't happen.
It's true.
And that really was powerful to me, because that needed to happen. You know, there needed to be a change, and that only happened because people were angry. You know, that's what caused so many lives to be transformed. That's what caused justice to happen, was from anger. Right. Because ultimately, anger is rooted in a sense of injustice.
Absolutely.
You know, you get angry because you feel like something is wrong and it shouldn't be that way, you know. And sometimes we're angry for others' sake, and sometimes we're angry on our own behalf.
Absolutely.
Most of the time, I would say on our own behalf. And that's where it's tough with anger, because you might be angry because the injustice is someone cuts you off in traffic. Well, that might not be the biggest injustice to fight for. You know, maybe that's one that you probably should forgive and move on and let go, you know. But there are injustices that are worth fighting for, and that's what Jesus is doing here too. Because notice too, this is one of the only times we see him angry here. And when we read the Gospels, the people are spitting on him, beating him, making fun of him and his authority, totally humiliating and annihilating him. Like, things that would make me so mad. If a single person spat on my face, I would be at a 10.
Absolutely.
That's just from one person spitting, let alone someone stripping you of your clothes and making fun of you and everything you stand for, and saying all of these just demeaning things. Like, that would make me really angry. But you don't see Jesus flipping tables there. You don't see Jesus hopping off the cross and yelling at him, or even yelling at him on the cross. This is one of the only times you see Jesus angry. And I think it's because Jesus here was angry for the innocent, for the people. And no one is standing up for them. No one is. In fact, everyone is taking advantage of the poor, of the helpless, of the strangers that aren't used to the customs, that are forced to trust these total strange marketers that assume, okay, you're probably right, even though they have no idea of knowing so.
Absolutely.
And that's what I love about Jesus too, is that if Jesus didn't get angry, he wouldn't really be a caring God. If God never got angry, he wouldn't really be a caring God then. Because anger, remember, is fighting against an injustice. You can't just have happy feelings towards an injustice. When a child gets hurt or physically abused, you don't just feel, oh, just think happy thoughts, it's going to be okay. You feel anger and you want to protect them and fight for them. Why? Because that's love, and God loves us. And I think it's amazing that the Gospels have this here, because it just shows another side of God, that his anger is for our good, is for the good of all of those who have been victims, all of those who have just been at the other end, right? Where you were a stranger in a land and you had to trust what people were saying, and you knew they weren't telling the truth, but you had to trust them anyways. Or in a situation where you were helpless and you literally had to give everything you had, whether it was to work or whether it was for providing for shopping or food or whatever it was, having to give everything because someone else was taking advantage and wanted to make a little extra money or whatever it is. God, he sees you and he sees that, and he is not just going to sit by and do nothing. He
Right.
is angry on your behalf.
Right.
And I don't know. I think that just helps me feel not alone. You know?
Absolutely.
I think there are times too where I want God to be angry on my behalf over really silly things.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, I don't know. Like, I have to wake up early and I'm so grumpy and mad. But God sees our deep heart issues, the things that we've forgotten, the things we've pushed aside because we're almost scared to get mad at.
Right.
Because if we get mad at it, then we think nothing will get done. If we get mad at it, then we're just going to be left hurt. If we get mad at it, then we're just going to ruin things and just destroy relationships and displease God even. Those things we just push aside because we're afraid of all those things. And yet God sees that hurt. He sees that wounding. He sees that time or place or person that took advantage of you. And he's angry. And I just think that's encouraging.
Absolutely.
Because you can come to God with those things.
Absolutely.
You can come to God with your hurts, with those things that make you angry, and know that he's not going to be there shaming you or saying you need to be happy. You know, just rejoice. Rejoice always. Instead, rejoicing comes from release. And that release comes from giving that anger and recognizing anger. You can't get release from anger if you don't recognize it. And by recognizing it means giving it to God and saying, hey, God, I really don't like this.
Right.
And then he'll help you and he'll show you. And that's why you can rejoice. See, I could go on a whole side tangent about that. But God doesn't call us just to be zombie happy Christians, like Jordan was saying with his example. Instead, he calls us to have his heart, which is happy and angry and sad and excited and all of these things, because that's what helps us to love, not just other people but ourselves and creation. And so I don't want to keep talking the whole time. I want you to talk. Good. I just think anger is something that has slowed me down a lot in my life. That I was a really, really angry child. Like a toddler, I was super angry all the time. I don't remember it as much, to be honest, but I was angry a lot. And instead of just addressing it, I mostly pushed it down. Mm-hmm. And that anger came out as sadness. And so I was sad for a long time, but I didn't feel better. And it made me realize when I would think about it that I'm like, I'm not really sad. I'm hurt and I'm angry. That was the deeper emotion for me, was anger. Mm. And so just recognizing that anger and recognizing it's okay to feel angry. And not only is it okay to feel angry, but God wants you to feel that anger and give it to him, was life-changing for me. That has given me more peace and freedom than I ever would have thought. I never realized how much anger I had until I was willing to look at it, willing to be uncomfortable with my emotions, willing to be uncomfortable with this situation and just be like, God, I don't like this. I am so mad. And there's so much release and joy in that. And so it's okay to get mad. It's okay to get angry. Jesus was angry, and he's not afraid of your anger. You can be angry. He's not going to be scared and run away. Anger can do good things. And so it's just recognizing that anger and being willing to be uncomfortable with it, where the change will happen.
Absolutely. I think anger is always a mask emotion, you know, but sometimes a mask that we need to wear, or it's something that we need to feel, you know. Anger, or mask is a bad word. I think I like blanket better, you know, because it does cover things like hurt, right? Mm-hmm. Anger is a direct influence of hurt, right? Whether small or big, I think anger is always covering up for hurt, you know? Mm-hmm. And so when we feel it, which we need to, it's just it's another expression of hurt, you know? Mm-hmm. And that could be good, because the expression doesn't always come through tears. It doesn't always come through, you know, disappointments and things like that. But sometimes it comes through just like anger, screaming, yelling, right? Because just like you were talking about earlier, it's the injustice piece of it, you know? And so now let's bring this back to, Jesus flipping the tables, because anger does play a part here, right? If we understand that anger is a cover up for hurt, then Jesus got angry because he was hurt. Why was he hurt? Because Jesus is the heart of God. Jesus is God.
Right.
And what hurt him was to see his people being swindled, being robbed, being extorted. And he's like, y'all are making this a den of thieves.
Right.
Right? And so what did he do? He didn't. Let's read this verse carefully, and I want you guys to understand what it says and understand how y'all react to it. I'm just going to be real with you. So in verse 15, when he had made a whip of cords, he drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen, and poured out the changers' money, and overturned the tables. And he said to those who sold doves, take these things away. Do not make my father's house a house of merchandise. So it said that he made a cord, right? We talk about this a lot, but for those who don't know, to make a cord is a long, drawn out process that probably took hours to do. Hours. So this is not just momentary anger, like he just took off his belt and just went for it. No. He thought it through.
Right.
This was boiling anger. Things that lasted all this time while he carefully crafted. To be so angry, yet so at peace, you can carefully craft something like that. It's crazy.
Man. That is crazy.
But what he also did was he drove the people out. Where does it say that he hit people?
He did it.
Where did it say that he hurt people? Where did it say he cussed people out? Right? How some people take this verse is because Jesus got mad and started flipping tables, that I can cuss out my boss because he doing me wrong.
Really?
No. Oh, I could tell off my mama because she don't know me like that. No. Oh, I can, flip off this person who cut me off from traffic because Jesus. No. Even if you got the Maverick City playing in your car, no. It's not okay. Why? Because one, Jesus got hurt over the heart of God. You getting hurt because you ain't getting your way.
Oh, say it.
You're upset because you're not getting what you want. If your boss doesn't give you the promotion, you start cussing him out and being like, well, I've been praying for this promotion and I never got it. That ain't righteous. No, that's spoiled. It's spoiled, quite honestly. And so understand, it's okay to be angry. You're gonna get angry. But when you look at how Jesus handled the situation, he drove away the problem, which was money.
Right.
He dumped out his money.
That's true.
He overturned the table where all these deals were going on, where people were calculating all these different things. He shooed away the animals, the things that people were trying to buy.
Right.
That's what he did. Right? That's what he did. And then he told the people, y'all are making this a den of robbers.
Right.
Y'all are making this, or other translations say, a house of thieves.
Yeah.
You are making it this way. Jesus is going for the problem. And he understood the problem's not the people. It's what the people are trying to do. It's what the people are following. It's what the people are giving to other folk.
Right.
That's the problem. So.
Wow. I love that. That's so good, because I think it is easy to look at people and just be so mad and, like you said, curse at our bosses, or you might not honestly have the courage to curse your boss to your face, but even talking badly about them behind their back is just as bad.
Right.
But anything that's like that anger. But we also know in the Bible it says our fight is not against flesh and blood, but against the powers and principalities, against these supernatural things. And so, like you said, how Jesus addressed the problem. He knows it's not these people. It's this spirit of religion.
Right.
It's this spirit of oppression. And he's trying to drive that out. Because, again, we don't see Jesus get angry a lot. And he could have gotten angry on the cross. He could have gotten angry when he was beaten and didn't. But he didn't. because all of those were inflicted on himself.
Right.
How many times can we truly say that we get angry for someone else's sake?
Right, come on.
That we act out of anger for someone else's sake. And that we act out of anger intentionally, like Jordan was saying. Like, when you make that cord, it's intentional in time.
Right.
Even if you are, let's say you are acting out of anger for someone else, is it a spur of the moment thing where you just shut someone down? Or is it a thought out anger?
Right.
It's so interesting because anger is such a explosive emotion, it seems like. But God wants us to have the spirit of self-control.
That's it.
And you can be angry and still have self-control. And I think it's so, I love that you point out it was the problem, right? So even when people are attacking you and you're getting frustrated, you got to recognize what the problem is.
Mm-hmm.
And truthfully, 9 out of 10 times it's you.
Honestly.
Because you don't like hearing what that person says. Even if that person said it in a mean way, it's still on you because you're receiving it in a way that's angry instead of seeing that person as a hurt person who just doesn't know how to express themselves.
Right.
Like, it's amazing. The more I've grown in my faith, the more I realize that I tend to be the one that overthinks things. I tend to be the one that makes my own life frustrating and miserable because of the way I think and the way I do things.
Yeah.
But when you see and hear Jesus, he wasn't fighting back at people who fought him. He was standing up for God's people to protect God. Not to protect God, to protect that sacred time people have with God.
Right.
To make sure that people can get what they need and have no barriers between them and God.
Right.
And we know God would do anything to make sure we can have a relationship with him. He did that by dying on the cross.
Right.
So he wasn't going to let some money, this spirit of religion stop that either.
Right.
He was going to flip those tables, and he would do it every single day if it meant that those people who are tired, exhausted, can come and worship the Lord.
Right. I think what comes up for me when you're saying that and how Jesus got angry. So I actually, just transparent moment, just got out of class. Just got out of class about an hour ago.
Uh-huh.
And it's a church history class. And we talked about Eastern Orthodoxy. And it's one of the 3 biggest tenets of, Christianity.
Okay.
And then there's Roman Catholicism, there's Protestantism, then there's Eastern Orthodoxy.
Gotcha.
Right? And that's a whole can of worms that I'm not going to open up. But one thing that they view differently that I think relates to this point, which is interesting, and I think we all need to have a piece of this, is how we usually see sin is a breaking of the law. In Protestantism, Roman Catholicism, and Western religion, we see it as God's laws, and I broke the law, therefore I suffer the consequences of it. How Eastern Orthodoxy sees it is we're all made in the image of God. And when you give your life to God, you are now, born again in the image in which he made you. And when you sin, you're going against the image of God. You are defiling the image of God in you. So when these people were selling these things to the people, trying to make a buck over something that God never wanted them to, what they're doing is they're defiling the image of God, right? Because it's not always, pastor wants me to do this, like, oh, I got to do this for God.
Right.
I got to do this for God. I'm trying to get right with God and all these different things. And they're supposed to be representatives of God. When you talked about Jesus getting angry in, throughout the Gospels, the people he gets angry at are the Pharisees, are the people who know the law, the people who are supposed to be representatives, because they are defiling the image of God, right? Even when he told Nicodemus, he's like, you're a teacher of the law and you don't know these things?
Right.
Like, what you mean?
Yeah.
You're supposed to represent me and you don't know this simple fact. And he was talking about being born again. Right? So it's like Jesus was hurt because, like, y'all are turning my Father's house, the image of God, into whatever you think this, into a King Soopers,
Right.
into a Walmart. You know?
Yeah.
So I think that's important to see, and that's the anger God had, because the image of God was being defiled. And through it, he acted within the image of God. Because Jesus never stepped outside of the image of God.
That's good.
So, but when we get mad and we want retribution, quote unquote, we have no problem stepping outside of the image of God. We have no problem. We have no problem stepping into the image of Jordan, stepping into the image of whoever,
Right.
of ourselves, our flesh, our sin, to get what we want. Right? That's why you see this concept of revenge so romanticized. Because it's about me doing whatever I need to do, stepping outside of how God made me to get back at this person because they deserve it, because I'm angry. Right?
That's good. And I think that's where a good place for us to leave this episode, because it causes us to reflect. My challenge from this is just to reflect on, just to be aware of your anger, right? And when you get angry, are you stepping outside the image of God to do that? Or are you angry for someone else's sake? And if you are listening to this and you're like, man, I definitely am not handling anger the right way, then bring it to God. Tell God about the things that make you angry. You know, there's a verse that talks about pray when you're thankful, pray when you're sad, right? And I would say pray when you're angry. Pray. Bring it to God. Let that be your first reaction. Not, I'm going to do a stress ball or I'm going to just stress play video game, then I'll talk to God about it later. No, bring it to God first. And he'll help show you what he wants you to know about it. Because there are some things God does want you to be angry about. And he wants you to do something about that anger.
Right.
And so you won't know that, though, until you ask him. And you won't know that if you try to push away the anger. But there are also some things God does not want you to be angry about.
Right.
And he wants you to let go. And instead, he wants to show you, hey, you're actually trying to cover a hurt in this anger.
Right.
And I want to heal that hurt. And so in your anger, when you're feeling that, try and pray. Before you say anything and do anything, just pray.
Right.
You know, some people say about taking big breaths, and that works too to help calm yourself. But I think I would add onto that to pray, because you might take big breaths, but the problem's still there. But God knows the solution, and he knows what you need, and he knows what the people around you need.
Right.
And so we want to invite you to, if you are someone who's struggled with anger, or you're someone who just wants to know what the image of God is like, because maybe you've been hurt by people who are supposed to represent the image of God, but all you see are these church pastors that are saying, you're not enough, you don't belong here, get out.
Right.
That's not God. He wants to have a relationship with you, and he would fight and do anything to make sure that you have that. That's what these verses are showing, is that he will push aside anything he needs to push aside so that you can have a relationship with him.
Absolutely.
And so if you want to take that step, because he's been reaching out, he's been doing all the effort on his end, and all you have to do is just say, God, I want a relationship with you. I want to give you a try. I want to trust you and believe in you. I'm tired of doing this on my own. I'm tired of trying to figure this out. It just leaves me exhausted. We're going to invite you to pray with us. And if you are someone who already is following God, then we want to invite you to pray with us too, because there's always one, because we want to cover these new believers in prayer and let them know and be there for them. That's what we do as a community. We cover each other. We're there. And also too, because I think all of us could use some wisdom in anger and wisdom in our feelings and knowing what hurt anger is trying to hide. And so wherever you are, if you're driving, please don't close your eyes. But If you are at home, I invite you to close your eyes and just get yourself comfortable and recognize where you are in your surroundings and take some breaths. Just to let go of distractions as we come to God. So, you can just say this prayer after me. Father God, thank you. Thank you that your love is fierce. Thank you that you want a relationship with me. Even when I act in my anger. Even when I hurt people. God, I have messed up. I have hurt people in my anger. I've hurt myself in my anger. And I'm tired of trying to control my own life. Lord, be my Lord. Be my Savior. I invite you into my life. If there's anything you want from me, Lord, I give it to you. From this day forward, I choose to follow you. And in Jesus' holy name, amen.
Amen.
If you prayed that prayer with us, we just want to say welcome. We're so happy that you did.
Woo.
So please feel free to email us. In fact, if you did pray that please do email us. We'd love to connect you with resources and local churches because your journey has just begun, and we are here for you, and we are so happy about that.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Way Truth Life podcast. Make sure to check out our previous episodes anywhere that you listen to podcasts. And make sure to check us out next week, same time, same channel, for a brand new episode. We love you all. Have a great night.
See ya.